everyone. Welcome back to Highlights of My Mediocre Career. Today's guest is a rapper, comedian, a producer, writer. His now series of Mean Boy. It's more than a trilogy now, isn't it, Mclean?
Well, I don't know what seven movies is called, but in the works,
It's some
yeah.
yeah, some kind of Roman name that we don't really know. So today's guest is my son, McLean Ambrogio, who said nepotism is dead. Welcome, McLean.
How are you? I'm very happy to be here. Technically, we're in the same house, but I feel like we're really going to connect with all this distance between us, a whole floor.
Yeah, well, we're practicing social distancing in our own house, which is nice because
Exactly.
after 8 weeks together, I think it's going to keep us as sane as possible. So I
I
usually
mean,
start
while
off.
we're while we're talking about it, is this your viewers' first interaction with your new haircut?
I think it is, and actually, you did this haircut
I did
because
that haircut.
yeah, because we're pulling together like Little House on the Prairie, like when Michael Landon used to. I don't know. Did he used to cut the girl's hair? I don't think so. I think the blind girl cut the girl's hair, and that's what happened. There was a lot of problems there.
A
So,
lot
and
of
then which led
problems.
to Highway to Heaven, and now I'm going back through my childhood. But what I usually start with is I usually ask my guests, do you remember where we met? And with you, it would probably be the delivery room. Do you remember that
Yeah.
experience?
I don't remember that. I do remember it being very dark and then it being very cold. But that would be probably it. That my first strong memory would be we went to the movies and I was like a very meek child, and I remember you had to tell the lady with like a wink, like, "Hey, could you make sure this movie isn't too loud?" And then you winked at the lady, and she was like, "Fine, whatever." And now being the age where like I've been through the years of that you would have a ticket taker job, I would be like, "This is the worst group of people I've ever seen." We saw Thomas the Tank Engine, the movie.
And it was kind of frightening because Alec Baldwin, I think Alec Baldwin attacked one of the people at the island of Sodor like he does a paparazzi. It was very scary.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you didn't find that a nurturing experience that I would step forward
I
to
mean, I
protect my son?
then I appreciated it,
Hmm.
and it was pretty nurturing up to the point where I realized that like it was like mostly a ruse. It was a good ruse, but parenting seems like 90% ruses and 10% nice talks.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you continue that cynicism from the time you were 6 to today, which is nice. So let's get into a couple of things. Now, like I said, you are my offspring. So what's it like to be the son of a stand-up comic and a comic yourself?
Well, to be the son of a stand-up comic before I was a comedian was weird, because, like, I would, for a long time, I wouldn't tell people you were a comedian because I think you get the same questions being the son of a stand-up that you get being a stand-up. Like, now that I am one, people will come up to you and be like, "Tell me a joke," or "Are you funny?" And they'll they'll tell you that too if it's your dad. Um, like teachers when they would be like, "What does your dad do?" I remember a few of them. I would say he's a stand-up comedian, and they thought I was just saying like, "You're a really funny guy," and I don't want to talk to a kid who's in high school who's so into his dad's humor that he just thinks he's a really funny guy. So he says, "Oh, he's a stand-up."
Hmm.
So I think it painted me in a bad light, which is really selfless that I turn this question about myself. Um, but yeah, I mean now being a stand up, you kind of see where all of those things fall in. I realize that it's the same curse that a stand up has.
Yeah. So, and kind of like your background to be a stand-up comic was kind of like the foundation was set in debate, kind of, right? Because you were
Yeah.
big into debate. You were actually the number one speaker in the state of New Jersey at one point. So tell me about how debate and stand up kind of mesh.
Well, I think like the big gap that I had in doing stand up was, I guess, stage fright, or kind of, a hesitation to be in front of people. And then I joined the debate team in high school because I'm perpetually frustrated. And those people who cannot get girlfriends and are perpetually frustrated, a good outlet is the debate team. And then I worked there. I really enjoyed it. Now I actually coach the same debate team at the high school, and it builds a foundation, I think, for a lot of people to learn how to be very quick and to get relaxed around people, to kind of realize that even in a stand-up situation, when people are focusing on you, there is an element of like judging yourself in the moment that doesn't really happen in the real world. Like you taught me in your comedy class, which I took to really get my foundation, that if you miss a line, nobody knows you missed a line. They don't have a script in front of you, and that's kind of what I learned um, through, like, in debate. Like, you can't keep judging yourself. You just got to do it.
Yeah. So now let me ask you, debate off the top of your head, best debate scene or example of debate in any Hollywood movie. Can you think of one?
Could I do a TV show?
Sure.
I think that if we're talking about real life debate, The Great Debaters is a movie about a Harvard uh, school
Right.
being beaten, yeah, by an all black debate team, which is based on a true story. That is like a really good depiction of what debate actually is. But I think a show that has gotten a debate scene like perfectly right and in their own voice, I'm a big fan of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but two there are two episodes. One where they debate who is at fault for knocking a bowl of cereal around in somebody's car, and I think that that might be the best like courtroom like scene with a debate.
Well, for me, off the top of my head, my favorite use of debate is in the movie And Justice for All with Al Pacino when he's like, "No, you're out of order. You're out of order."
Well,
And
there's less yelling in real debate, which I think is why that might disqualify it for me, because if
well,
you yell, you actually get penalized.
for me, I think yelling, overrides strategy, but that's just the way I am. So let's talk about stand up. So tell me about your first time on stage. What did it feel like?
Um, I guess there was honestly like kind of a numbness. It took a little while for me to get that like fulfilling thing when you come off stage and you really kill it. Um, and I think that's like working out the kinks and just figuring everything out. But the first time I ever like went on stage and I remember like really killing it and then coming off was actually, you were at the show. It was a show at a diner, and uh, it was weird because the show was weird, and I mean we don't. I don't. You do, but I don't play crazy rooms. But sometimes you feel like you're in a diner and you've taken a weird turn in life, and it was just very strange. And then I got up, and the crowd was super receptive. They were great, and I just killed. And most of it was just me like riffing. And I think when you're riffing, it's like there's no safety net. It's just like exhilarating feeling.
Yeah, because creating in the moment is always better than lines that you plan. Um, I remember us walking in, probably one of the first shows that we did outside of people that we knew together. And I forgot where it was. It was some bar that was
Oh, the
packed.
River Barn,
The River
the
Barn.
something River Barn.
Right.
I
And we were
remember that.
there, and it was one of my ex students had done had planned a show, and she asked if we could do it. And we're looking around the room, and I remember we were waiting to go on. And I said to you, this could be very, very bad.
Yeah.
Um, but we have to kind of set the tone. And, she had me MC, and it ended up being better than it could have been. A horrible show, but it ended up being not that bad. I mean, what were your recollections of that night?
I remember going in, and this was pretty early on in my career still. And then I also was working out new material, and I kind of thought it was a show. It was like a Wednesday or something. So I sort of thought, oh, it would be kind of dead, and I could work out some new stuff. And then we got there, and like you said, it was a huge room with a bar in it that had two sides. Um, and then there was another like half divided wall with a bunch of people just eating dinner. So when we got in, I was like, "Oh shit, this is exactly what you have told me is not a good room for comedy." And then we met a bunch of people who I had not met before, who were the other comics who all knew you, and I was like really nervous. And then when we went on, the entire place like stopped to watch the comedy show. And it was really nice, and it was a perfect example of like, if everybody kind of jumps in and goes with it, you can get like a really nice show out of anywhere. It's just like really hard to get everybody to do that. And then also after I got off stage, a bunch of old ladies uh, like talked to me for an hour. So I remember that.
In the business, we should call them mature groupies, I think. But anyway, so off the top of your head, in the shows that you've done, give me your best gig and worst gig.
Worst gigs was the second show I ever did. Am I allowed to say names of places on this thing, or are you gonna black it out like a prisoner's letter?
No, we don't black out anything on my mediocre career. Go ahead.
Is that a subconscious that you just say miserable every time you talk about your career?
It's
Okay.
Freudian.
Um, the worst show I ever did was at what is that place on
Odiamos.
Adiamos? Yeah, okay. And I got up, and they really didn't like me. And the whole vibe of the room was like a much older vibe than I was used to, and it was a richer vibe than I was used to. And I believe that you should be able to talk to any audience now, but it was like the second show I ever did, so I was just basically going off a script. And then the MC who introduced me was a nice guy, but also equally frustrated. So he introduced me as like he was like, "Oh, and then I got this guy coming up." And it was like, "Oh, yikes, you didn't even remember my name." And I so I went up, I tried to save it, um my set, not the show. And I had at that point a joke that mentioned Trump in it. It was not positive or negative, and I said Trump. A whole table got up and said Trump 2020. Meanwhile, this was like 3 months after the election. This is like he's fresh in. They're already looking at 2020, and then another table did a Trump 2020, and I was horrified for many reasons. And then I finally got a single laugh because I have jokes where I basically just say balls because I I mean I had testicular cancer. I put that in to my act, and they loved it. They did not like any other parts of that where I didn't say balls, but every time I said balls, that crowd went berserk, and it was weird. And then it was followed by a now deceased puppet master who was also equally mad.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, well that kind of happens, but there's so many things in comedy where they say don't talk about politics because you divide a room.
yeah.
And I think you can talk about anything as long as you do it well. How about best gig?
Um, best gig. The most recent gig that I did, I think, might be my best gig because I ended the show. I think maybe somebody went after me, but I think I was one of the anchors on the show. Did a lot of new material that I didn't write for the first time. I'm just trying to kind of come up with a concept. and it all worked, and it just felt like, I don't know. I describe it to people as like you're doing a joke, and as you're doing it, you're already loading up the next joke in your head. And when you're doing that like effortlessly and seamlessly, it just feels great. Taking your pauses, and that was at the Black Box Pack. Check out the Black Box Pack. That's my little plug. So,
Yeah, look at you. You're throwing in little,
well,
little
I
sponsorship
have
things in this. Yeah.
I have connections all around town that I'm gonna beg for money after this. So,
Well, that's what we do on these podcasts. So now you mentioned the testicular cancer and everything, and like,
mhm.
you know, that was a kind of horrible time in both of our lives, but I think it was a springboard for some creativity because I think that's when you started to get into rap more. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I had been into like a very, what anybody now, including myself, would call like a really small scope of rap music, like what I would call white guy rap music. Um, Things that you would hear in a movie, or like mostly just like Eminem and stuff like that for a long period of time. And then I kind of branched out. I had like older people in my life, like a wide variety of age and friends, and older people in my life being like trying to put me onto different types of music. And then it was more like more than an interest. I was very invested in it. And then I had cancer, and afterwards I was like, why am I limiting anything that I would want to do? Why don't I just try to do stuff and really like figure it out? And I do think that like became a springboard for creativity, but more curiosity, and just saying like, how do you accomplish this stuff? So I redid our basement, or part of our basement, and built a studio, with a booth and with the mic and everything. And then I worked with my friends. We made a rap album, which now is not very good. But I learned from that, and I'm actually proud to say now that that is not a good album, because I've learned from it and I've developed it. And my friends decided that that wasn't the way they wanted to go, but I still had one friend who wanted to produce. So he learned how to make beats, and I learned how to write and rap. And yeah, I mean, now I have three albums. I'm writing a fourth, and I'm trying to like take it from what I thought rap could be to like a different, newer area, and just kind of doing as I feel. It's not. It's almost freeing when you say to yourself like your passion doesn't have to be the thing you make money on, because then you're just worried about pleasing yourself. And I think that's where I am with that. Um, but yeah,
But ultimately, I think an artist has to please themselves first because if you go out and try to please the public, I don't think that you're as creative as you can be. It's almost like a comic that does material to try to appease a room, which I think gets you dangerously close to being a hack comic. But
well, I think that to that point, when you go and try to appeal to like something that you've seen people respond to, you're inherently building off of some other idea instead of just starting a new idea yourself.
right, and I also think your kind of progression with rap, like you have to start somewhere. So you started
Right.
somewhere, and you say, like, there were songs on that first album that I really liked, but as a writer or an artist, it's like you start someplace and then you learn from, if you want to call them mistakes. It's
Yeah.
like, they say like you have to get the bad writing out, which
Yeah.
means like you have to get it out and then get to a level where you're like, okay, you made your mistakes, you learn from those, and you get to that level where you're comfortable, like you said on stage, when you're there and you're just waiting and you're loading up your next joke. And that's kind of a progression that happens with artists. But along your rap journey, you met some people. Tell me about meeting Redman.
Yeah, so one day I went to Montclair State early on in my collegiate career, and he was signing autographs there, and it was not really he's a honorary alumni from there, and he was signing autographs, and he did like kind of a small seminar, and so I met him there. I talked to him, and really laid on the cancer card pretty hard, and then it was like, okay, we'll talk to you. And he was just like a nice guy. It's something that uh, was like a really interesting experience. It almost feels like a world away at this point. Um, but I mean, like, I think what it comes down to is that there are people that if you reach out and find them, that's the hardest part, who will believe in you, even if you're not like developed or very good at what you're doing, if you just kind of have the passion for it. And I still don't know what, like, at the end of the day, I still don't know what he really thought of what we were up to, or what um, the actual extent of everything was going to be. And I don't know that for myself in like my own music thing. Um, but yeah, I think that it's interesting to see that there are people out there who will believe in you, and especially with rap. I mean, like, if you look at the continuum of where you start, like, I'm a very privileged person when you're looking at a rapper, and it's part of the reason why I don't really consider myself like that's like not really a primary thing for me, because it's just kind of like a hobby at this point. But yeah, I mean, people will help you out if you ask and you're genuine about what you're doing.
Well, it's funny. I learned from listening to your rap albums and then listening to other rap, which like I wasn't a big rap guy. I'd heard some things, but listening to it and hearing like kind of like the rhythms in the lines, and they don't call
Hmm.
it lyrics, they call it beats. What do they call it for an old
Bars.
bars? So anyway, just listening to that and like, when I was in college, I worked with a poet and I understood that from the poet that if I read the poem, it was different than if the poet read the poem because he put the lines and the stanzas in the right place. And it's kind of the same when you listen to a rapper and kind of the way the lines work together. Like if I listen to a Dylan song or something, kind of the rhyme scheme in the song can vary. Like there's a line in Idiot Wind where it's like he does the rhyme in the middle of the song. I'm trying to remember what it was. It's like where the springtime turned and he extends the line slowly to autumn, which rhymes with the middle line, and they do that in rap a lot. But tell me about like to close the rap segment. Give some background on who Redman was, because there's going to be old people like me listening to this
Yeah,
who are
yeah,
not going to know who Redman. And then there was one day, didn't you go into the city into a studio with
yeah.
him? Just tell us about that.
So like, um, Redman is a Newark-based rapper, um, and he started off with a group. I'm not going to get too technical with you guys, because if we're clearing this up for old people, then this is going to open a lot more doors.
Hey, thanks for being open minded. Keep going.
Uh, he started with a group, then he worked as a singular entity for a very long time. He has what a lot of people consider like one of the better 3 album runs in rap history. Um, he works with Wu-Tang Clan, who's like a lot bigger of a more noticeable name at this point than him. But they so one day I went into the city, um, and I went to a studio in Brooklyn, Sound Labs, and just kind of sat there while they did music, and it was really cool. It was just like it was like an out of body experience, kind of. and I probably should have been more vocal while I was there, but I felt like a 8-year-old kid, like at take your child to work day a little bit, and I was like, I was like, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to do anything like that might bother somebody because I'm pretty sure they'll just tell me to go outside and I'll have to figure out my own way home. Um, and like it was interesting to see the process of music getting made, and the things that I took away from it are how like if you watch any movie where somebody's making a song, they go in, they do the song perfectly the first time, or they exaggerate it, have like a really hard time making it. But it's always somewhere in the middle, and like maybe other people knew that, but I didn't feel that way at the time. Um, and watching people go in and being like, all right, I got like 5 takes of this, so just run it back 5 times. And then them coming out, listening to it, and being like, oh, all 5 of these suck. And they had spent hours and hours writing the thing, and they instantly knew that it sucked. So, yeah, I mean, it was interesting. And I think if we're going to close off the rapping segment, what my whole thing is like, what I learned from it most is if you're going to do something that you feel like maybe a little out of place doing, do it respectfully and do it with the best intentions in mind. And also, like, if you don't think you can do something, you probably can. You just have to surround yourself with the right people and, like, kind of go with an unyielding drive to do it. And yeah, I mean, not to sound like a motivational speaker, but that's kind of what I learned from that I can apply to other things.
Yeah, well, what I remember about that, and I'm not sure I'm remembering it right, but I could have swore it was St. Patrick's Day, and you went, and so you had like a bunch of African American artists eating corned beef and smoking pot, and it was like kind of like a great diversity mix of, you know, of like a melting pot of everything. But like one of the things that you said, and people have told me this throughout the years, is like always ask for help. Always ask
Right.
for help, because if you don't ask for help, you're not going to move yourself to the next level. And talking about the next level, let's talk about filmmaking, writing, and producing and doing your own films. So take me down that path.
So I started making movies, and I've been making movies since like the 6th grade. And the first movie I ever made, now a cult classic, is Spider-Man Nation One: Spider-Man versus the Hulk, and which is now, like I said, it's a whole subgenre on YouTube. And we didn't start it, but we were definitely first. So what it was was we only made it because one of my friends had a Spider-Man costume and the other friend had a camera, and it was kind of just like a very natural, we have 2 things, how do we put them together? um, and it would start with these little things where my one friend would be like, oh look, that's Spider-Man, and he would chase Spider-Man through his house or through whatever. The most popular one was Spider-Man was in his bathroom on the toilet, and that got very popular in our school, to the point where it was sent out as a mass email to the entire school by somebody, and we got in a lot of trouble for that, even though that wasn't us. That was just somebody posting a link. Um, so then I was like, the natural progression is that we have to have our big season finale ending movie. So it was Spider-Man Nation, Spider-Man versus the Hulk, which now has, I think, over 1 million views on YouTube, because I think we caught the Marvel movie uh, thing right before it really hit off, and right before Marvel bought Spider-Man back. So everybody was like looking that up, and like little kids look it up, and there are a lot of mean comments, but it's really like it's a fun thing to like just go back and be like, wow, we were doing this back then. And then the follow up, everybody was clamoring for a follow up, which was Spider-Man Nation 2: Spider-Man versus Venom. Um, and I don't know, the first one that we did, we had a premiere at our house, and it was outside because that's the only place we could have it. And it was in like May, and we were really excited. And then we got like the coldest day in May ever. People were in like winter jackets, and we projected it outside. And an hour before we were going to do it, the laptop we edited the whole thing on froze and just shut down. So we had to re-edit all the footage together. And actually, like, I look at that as kind of an origin story for us doing film, because I remember exactly like my friend Justin. He was like, "Yeah, we could put this together in this specific way, and I'll be in it, and that's how like we can go about making the movie." And he was the logistics guy. And then I was like, well, here's how the story should work. It should start here and end here. And I'm not very proud of that story as far as arcs or heroes' journeys, but it was like us figuring out our roles and what we were best at. And then my friend John, who had never edited anything in his life, we gave him a laptop an hour before with all the footage, and we were like, figure out iMovie, figure out how to edit it. And now, like, I would turn to those two people to do those jobs in the new movies we make. Um, and when we really started hitting our stride, I think, was senior year of high school. So we had previously made a movie called Mean Boys, Defenders of Justice. And it was a it was a response to our school passing this legislation called HIB, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. Now, like, obviously, I'm not pro any harassment, intimidation, or bullying, but what it became was people would slap somebody with an HIB for like really weird things, and you would get expelled or suspended for things that you almost thought were harmless or whatever. There was no precursor like there was before of, hey, don't do that again. So we made a movie telling the story of a fictionalized version of our school, um, complete with like a principal that we were told we can't use his name, so we just cut the second half of his name off, and we changed the first letters of other people's names, and we just made it about the idea that they would create a secret police force to like enforce this HIB thing. And it was dumb and it was ridiculous, but it was like us figuring out what we could do within the confines of what we had. And then the next year, for our senior project in film, we made Mean Boys 2, which is a prequel and widely regarded by the Mean Boys fandom as the best Mean Boys. And it's it was a story about how the principal, who was a bumbling fool, became the principal, and that stems from us going to him and asking him if we could do a film festival in the school so that we could make money to make Spider-Man Nation 3. And we would split it halfway with the film department of the school and halfway to us. And he like gave a very, very strange answer. And so we were like, oh, now we got to get this guy. If only he just let us make our bad movie, we wouldn't have had to target him in a good movie.
So we've got about 10 minutes left.
Hmm.
And so I know that one of the hardest things to do is to get a group of people together and focus
Yeah,
on a project and get them to produce something, which you've done because you just use bands as an example. Bands break up all the time because a group of people can't stay together because everybody's got different artistic and creative views, and you've managed to do that. So I just read your latest script,
yeah.
and so it's definitely got its own kind of genre in it. So if you were going to just tell me an overarching view of what the whole series is about and where you want to go with it, give me that scope.
Um, so in a lot of ways, the series is about like the earlier things are poking fun at real life stuff. Um, there's a controversy now that's emerging again that has emerged before. That same high school that we went to, the mascot is an Indian, a Native American, and we created a character in our second movie who's like the patriarch of the school, who is an Indian chief, and kind of the point of that was that anybody who said like that's an offensive character, we would be like, okay, well, this is a movie that's a joke. It's satirizing the fact that this is what you're putting your foot forward. Like, so there is elements of that, but at the same time, like most of the series is us just saying like, would this be funny and can we make something that outrageous but also digestible, because I think that sometimes people get turned off by something so ridiculous. And then there's also like an element of my friend says every single movie that we make is just trying to make the other movies make sense. And he's kind of right, because we make everything out of order as far as the timeline. So it's finding creative ways to fit things in and do certain stuff, and like it's an exercise in film and what we can do, and what in general it's like what have we learned that we can put together and then use on projects that actual people want to see.
Well, I think like J.J. Abrams said when they asked him why he was successful, he said, because I finished my scripts. And you're
Hmm.
like way ahead of most people in the fact that you've done this multiple times. So, McLean, this is the section of the podcast where we call the Fast Five, where I ask you five questions, totally unrelated. You just answer off the top of your head, okay? So
Okay.
you're good, okay? So, what's the worst thing you ever did as a kid and got away with?
I stole something from a party store.
Okay. Worst hack line you've ever used or heard?
Um, I mean, I guess in general, I've heard so many dick jokes.
Okay, can you
Any
think of
dick
one?
joke. Um, yeah, I heard somebody who was a ventriloquist pull out a black dummy, and he said, "Don't poke me in the eye with that thing," and the crowd went nuts. It was
Okay.
very discouraging.
All right. What's the deal with Mitch McConnell's neck?
I think that he did a soul thing where they said, "For your chin, I will allow you great power."
Okay. What completely safe animal are you frightened of?
Bird, any
Bird?
bird,
Okay.
small
What?
birds, big birds.
Any reason why? Can you
I think if
psychoanalyze
you
it?
were to get like psychological about it, I'm a short guy, so I think anything in general that can easily just get above my head and dive down and attack me, that's tough.
Last question. What's the most important lesson you've learned from your father?
Um, this is a tough one. These are supposed to be fast. You should have told me
Well,
to.
they should be coming off the top of your
Um,
head fast.
the most important lesson was
Wow, this is depressing. Child Services sees this. I'm going to be in trouble.
well, if you could spin it like there's so many important lessons, I can't narrow one down.
Yeah.
Um, no, but probably the most important lesson you ever taught me in a serious sense is perspective is reality. So, like, you can see something from one way and it appears as your reality, but that's not always the truth. And you told me that when I found out you were cheating on mom. So,
Okay. All right. So thanks for that. So now the three people that see this will be calling your mother.
yeah.
So, all right. So, McLean, thank you for being part of. Where can people see your stuff? Like, where can people hear your rap music, the videos, all that stuff?
So you can hear my music on Spotify. I'm on like a lot of different stuff, but the best way to do it is Spotify. Um, and I'm the group AVP on Spotify. There are a lot of AVPs, but keep scrolling down and keep listening because especially now artists need your support. And I will plug myself, but I would also like to plug something else. Is that okay?
Sure.
Um, so in we're currently, if you're listening to this in the future and you've survived, we are currently in obviously this pandemic, right? And there is a group called Feed America that is working really hard to make sure that kids who were going to school and getting school lunches uh, still get fed and still get the things that they need. And if you're listening to this and you haven't just totally been turned off um, at this point by our rambling, um, please go to the Feed America website. And if you can donate anything, I know it's a tough time to donate, but that's a really important cause, and like 100% of the funds are going directly to the people. But you could check me out on Instagram at Mac2Stacks, which is my rapping name. There's underscores there between the Mac, the two, and the stack. And that's like the best way to figure out what I'm up to and to check out my stuff. So
Oh, well, thanks again. And thanks for the positive message, not about the podcast, but about the Feed America thing. So,
yeah, no
and,
problem.
and thanks everyone for tuning in again. Watch for the next podcast and stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you soon.